Hello and welcome to Historyful today. We are going to be going back to the Holocaust. This is something that my 11-year-old had asked me about this week, and so I thought I would share with you 5 of the heroes of the Holocaust. Often we talk about all the tragedy and the horrible things that happened during this time period, but I really wanted to focus today on looking for the heroes and looking for the helpers. Let's get started with our first helper, Corrie ten Boom. Corrie ten Boom was a watchmaker in Holland, and she was a woman of incredible faith, and she believed that all people, regardless of who they were, deserved to be treated with love and respect. Throughout the years when Jews were hunted down and sent to their deaths in concentration camps and ripped from their families, Corrie ten Boom and her family offered a place of shelter and refuge for these Jewish families and those opposing the Nazis. Every day there were about 6 people living in her home and trying to hide from the Nazis, and there would also be people coming and going. Some would stay for a few days, others would only stay for a few hours before she found them another safe place to be able to go and hide. Unfortunately, her actions didn't come without a price. She was captured and she was imprisoned for 11 months. For 4 months she was kept in solitary confinement in a tiny little cell, and then following that she was sent to 2 different concentration camps. Unfortunately, during the second concentration camp that she was in, her and her sister were both there together, and her sister passed away. She wasn't able to get freedom that she really deserved. Upon her release from the concentration camp, she spent her life devoted to God and being a missionary and telling the world about her faith and how it sustained her in one of the most trying times of her life. Corrie ten Boom passed away peacefully at the age of 91, on her 91st birthday actually, in California. She lived in the most exemplary life. Corrie ten Boom has actually written a book and you can go and read it. It's called The Hiding Place, and I'll link that down below. And actually she's also had her book made into a movie. I didn't know about this, but I saw it come up on my Facebook feed during the week, and so I'll try and link that down below as well if I can find where you can watch it, where you can stream it too. Our next Holocaust hero is Paul Grüninger. During the 1930s, life for the Jewish people in both Germany and Austria was pretty harrowing, and out of desperation they were trying to get out. They were trying to get anywhere where they could find some kind of refuge, and one of those places was Switzerland. Unfortunately, like many other places, they had closed their borders to Jews, and they had their border patrols turning them away as soon as they reached the border. The genuine desperation that these people must have been feeling is palpable. There's no words to explain how they must have been feeling. And to know that if they didn't get through these borders, that they were probably going to be going back to their deaths. Paul Grüninger decided that enough was enough. He was a man of the law. He had been a police officer, he had been in the military, and now he was a border patrol officer. So he had spent his life living by the law and enforcing the law. So he was probably like one of the last people that you would expect to be breaking the law to allow these people through the border into Switzerland. But he did. He falsified up to 3,600 passports so that these Jews could pass through without detection. His superiors became a little bit suspicious because they had said don't let them in, but somehow there were more and more Jewish people turning up in Switzerland. And so he was eventually fired, and he did not care. He said that the pain of losing his job was nothing in comparison to what these Jewish people were going through, and he had no regrets about what he did. He even went above and beyond and checked in on those people that he allowed through the border. He paid for one little girl to go to the dentist, and he bought another little boy some shoes, and he just really had a beautiful heart about him. And he didn't think of himself as a hero. All these people didn't think of themselves as heroes, but there's no other word for them. Without their help, these Jewish people would have gone back to certain death. Next we have Nicholas Winton, and you've probably heard his story, but you may not know a lot of the details. So I'm going to try and give you a few more details. He was an incredible man, and I just love him. In the winter of 1938, Nicholas Winton had planned to go on a ski trip with his friend Martin Blake. His friend Martin had convinced him that instead of going on this ski trip, that they should go to Czechoslovakia and to help the Jewish people. There were Jewish families pouring into Prague, and they thought that they could go and help. War was almost inevitable at this point, and they were scared, but they thought, what can we do to help? And so they went to Prague, and they didn't know what to do really. They thought, it's too dangerous for us to be helping the adults, but what we can do is we can help the children. At the time, Britain had made plans and had operations in process for assisting children fleeing from Austria and Germany. However, there was no one helping the children in Czechoslovakia, and this was where they were going to focus their efforts. Winton was able to successfully place around 700 children into Britain. He found foster families for them in Britain, and he put them on trains and sent them there. They had families, they still had families, and they were ripped from their families, these poor little children on the train station, their parents. As a mother, I cannot imagine standing on that train station in Prague and putting my children on a train, not knowing if I would ever see them again. The chances of me not seeing them again would be pretty high. And we have seen it time and time again, that parents handing over their children to strangers in hopes that they are saved. He was successfully able to get many, many terrified children out of Czechoslovakia. Unfortunately, the last train that he sent with 250 children never ever made it, and those children, nobody knows what happens to those children. Once again, he has never claimed to be a hero. He actually never even told his wife. His work and his efforts never came to light until about 50 years later, when his wife was doing some cleaning and she came across a trunk in the closet, and she opened it up and it was full of all these papers, and on these papers were the names of all the little children that he had saved, and all where they went to, and how old they were, and all their information. And he had kept that, but he had never ever told his wife what he had done, because he didn't think it was anything great. It was just what you would do. Once he had found homes for all these children, he didn't keep in contact with any of them. But a few years ago, or quite a few years ago now, they all came together and they surprised him, which was an absolute beautiful moment. I'm sure some of you would have seen the video that's been around on social media and YouTube for a long time, but I will put a link to it down below where you can see when they surprised him. All these children that he saved who probably would have died otherwise, and they were all old ladies and old men now, and it was just an absolutely beautiful thing. I've watched it many times and I still cry every time that I watch it. It's just absolutely beautiful. And I'm so thankful for this man and for his humility and just the amazing person that he is. So before I get too emotional, we better move on to Irene Sendler. And she was Polish and worked in the Polish Social Security Department. And she wanted to help these Jewish people. And she thought, what can I do? What can I do with what I have? And she decided that she was going to start falsifying these documents for the Jews. However, being the woman that she was, she thought, I can do better than this. And at the time, the Nazis had forced all these Jewish people into the Warsaw Ghetto. And it was not big enough, and there was not enough food. There was starvation happening. There was illness and disease and just horrible, horrible conditions. And so she decided that she was going to go into this ghetto and pretend that she was looking for typhus, people who were sick with typhus. And she was really not after that. She was taking in medication, she was taking in food and blankets and all sorts of supplies. And you would think maybe this was enough. She was already falsifying documents, and now she was taking medicine and food and caring for these Jewish people who had been displaced and treated so horribly. But she thought, I can do even more. Irina decided that she was going to start smuggling out the babies and the little children, and she was going to do it in any way that she could. She would take these little ones out in suitcases, she would take them out in bags, she would take them out in coffins, she would take them out in whatever she could, because she needed to save these little children. And as a mother again, sending my child off with a stranger, not knowing if I would ever see them again, is probably my worst nightmare. Once she had these little ones out of the ghetto, she made sure that they were taken and protected and given to foster families to look after them, in the hopes that one day they might be able to be reunited with their parents. She kept records of every child that she took out of that ghetto, and she made sure that she knew that if their parents came looking for them, that she knew where they were and what family they were with. Eventually, the Nazis caught up with her and they tortured her for days, trying to find out where these children were. But like a mother, she did not ever give up their identities or where they were. Because of Irina Sendler, almost 2,500 children were saved from almost certain death, and yet she still wished that she could have done more. I don't know what more this lady could have done, but she wished that she could have done more. All these heroes that think that they still hadn't done enough, they are just incredible people, aren't they? Finally, we have Oskar Schindler, who is the inspiration behind the film Schindler's List. Like all the people in this video, he was an incredible man. And he was a German businessman, and he was making a lot of money. He absolutely loved business, and he loved making money, he loved partying, and he loved the ladies. He was probably not someone that you would suspect was too interested in humanitarian causes, really. He was, in fact, a member of the Nazi Party at the time. Oskar Schindler had a lot of Jewish people working for him, and he started becoming really quite hostile to the Nazi Party and how that they were treating the Jewish people. And so he started looking out for his Jewish workers and caring for them a lot more and trying to look out for their best interests. For someone who seemed to live a pretty self-involved life previously, when push came to shove, he really showed his true colours and his true humanity. Oskar Schindler's factory was considered by the Nazis to be essential to the war effort because they supplied supplies to the army. This is what gave Oskar Schindler the upper hand. Because his business was essential, that meant his factories were essential and his workers were also essential. He told the Nazis that if they wanted his business, he got to keep his workers, his Jewish workers. However, if the Nazis had looked a little bit closer, they would have noticed that many of his workers were children and women and people who weren't really factory workers at all. Eventually, Oskar Schindler was able to move his factory to Czechoslovakia, and along with it, 1,200 of his factory workers and their families and their children, thus saving them from a pretty horrible fate if they had been captured by the Nazis. Like many of the others, he just said that he just did what he had to do. The Holocaust was a horrific time. I don't think anybody is ever going to forget the torture and the tragedy of that time period. These people were everyday heroes. They gave what they could. They gave what they knew how to give and what resources they had open to them. Sometimes we think that we need a lot of money to be able to make a difference, or that we need to be highly powerful or have a lot of connections, but really to make a difference we just need to start. We just need to start somewhere. We may not have the opportunity to ever go to a war-torn country and help there, and that's okay. What we can do is we can start in our own homes, we can start in our own cities, in our own towns, and look for opportunities where we can serve and where we can bless the lives of others. Whether it is just opening the door for somebody at a shop or smiling at somebody. Smile is free, and you never know what a difference that can make. Can we go and help those who are elderly, who might need some help, who might need some company? What can we do? Think this week, what can you do to bless the lives of others? And that I will leave with you today, and I will see you next week.